Solana is having a pretty hard time recently. Its total value locked is declining quite massively, and that's measured in US dollars, right? So when you look at DeFi Llama and at the TVL for Solana, the top was in December of last year, roughly 15 billion. This now went down all the way to 2.6 billion. So it's not necessarily money flowing from one blockchain to the next, because measured in SOL, this is relatively stable except the recent crash. It's because the ecosystem tokens themselves, they lost value, right? So when we look, for example, here at Solend, it went down in terms of total value locked by almost 60%. When we look at Radium, right, one of the major decentralized exchanges, minus 29%. And some people say this is because of the inflation rate, right? When we look at Solana's inflation rate, how much new tokens get issued per year, according to Messari.io, that's at 8.04% per annum. That's in the grand scheme of things actually not that much. Of course, Bitcoin and Ethereum's inflation rate is way lower. But when we look at, for example, Avalanche, it's almost 30%. So Solana is somewhat in the middle ground. But the problem is a lot of those ecosystem tokens, they had pretty massive backing in the early days from venture capitalists. And those venture capitalists, they've got lock-up periods, right? They've got vesting schedules, meaning over a period of time, they're then allowed to sell the token. And once that supply hits the market, that's then when the token prices go down, and thus the total value locked of the ecosystem is going down. Now, we are looking at all of this in the context of a crypto winter. Everything went down, right? So of course, Solana is not expected to go up. That's why I think it's important to look at relative valuations. This is just Solana in US dollars, right? And when we look at the top over here, that happened on the 6th of November 2021. When we now look at Bitcoin on that day, we are seeing elevated prices as well. So there's no surprise here, right? When Bitcoin tends to go up, Solana also goes up. When Bitcoin tends to go down, when there's a crypto winter, Solana also tends to go down. Now, what about Solana measured in Bitcoin? So that's now this chart here. And what we can see here, I find this pretty fascinating. First of all, we've got a pretty constant rejection zone here, right? But when we look at the 6th of November, we also have the top. So there seems to be something more going on. There seems to be inherent leverage, as in when Bitcoin goes up just a little bit, Solana tends to go up more and vice versa. So even if we measure this in Bitcoin, even if SOL is divided by BTC, you can still see the same kind of top. Now, how much have we lost now since that top measured in Bitcoin? We are looking at an underperformance of 57%, and the bottom here was at an underperformance of 74% almost. And this is not the US dollar chart, right? This is the Bitcoin denominated chart. The Ethereum chart does not look that different. There are a few more lines, but still same thing. We bounced off a resistance. We come from this overall bullish trend, and currently we are rather in this bearish trend, both for Ethereum, but also for Bitcoin. And this is not necessarily bullish, right? When we just look at this from a TA perspective, very objectively, it doesn't necessarily look like a breakout here, right? It rather looks like a fake out. So the potential downside here, even relative to Ethereum, is pretty bad, right? It's a minus 40% performance. And already Ethereum doesn't look too great, right? Ethereum is in negative momentum. People are not too keen to take on risk with the merge. But the comparison to Bitcoin and Ethereum isn't really apples to apples, right? Because the risk profile of Bitcoin and Ethereum is lower, right? You have less risk that you take on with those two top cryptocurrencies. Solana is really an altcoin. Bitcoin and Ethereum are pretty much the established players. So what we actually might want to look at when we look at the same kind of capital competing with each other, we want to look at Solana's relative performance to other layer 1 competitors, to other smart contract platforms. And let's do exactly this. If you so far enjoy this video, don't forget to give a thumbs up. Thank you. So let's first start out with Solana relative to Cardano. Cardano is, in terms of market cap, in a similar range. But even here, right, even in something like Cardano, we can still see the same chart pattern. Solana is in an underperforming trend versus Cardano. That's surprising, right? Because Cardano also went down quite massively. And Cardano could almost be seen as a more risky asset. Even though it's similar in size, its adoption is lower. Solana has more of an ecosystem and has more decentralized applications built around it. For Cardano, a lot of the growth is still to be expected to happen in the future. But still, in a crypto winter, risk versus reward favors Cardano over Solana. Basically, also since their top at the beginning of November of last year. Now, here's an interesting comparison. What if you compare this to rather risky layer 1 competitors? So, for example, Phantom. Phantom is pretty small. Phantom has also taken quite a bit of a beating in this winter. Let's look at Solana measured in Phantom. And this is interesting, right? Phantom seems to have lost so massively that Solana is relatively speaking quite high versus Phantom. We tend to be in a sideways trading range. Potential upside is maybe 35%. The potential downside is 57%, maybe even 70%. But of course, when we look at this again versus larger players such as BNB, this is what we are getting, a same bearish trend. And look at how this trend might even break and accelerate, right? So maybe this is just a hint of what could happen to the Bitcoin valuation or to the Ethereum valuation. Maybe this might even accelerate. Now, this is all just technical analysis, right? But I still find it interesting to look at the data and to see at where the market is currently at. And I do think if we turn bullish, that the potential rally that might come afterwards is likely going to be massive, because right now a lot of money is in stable coins. This here is the stable coin dominance. So we're looking here at USDC, at Tether, and at DAI, at the dominance of those three stable coins. And we've got this here on the y-axis. So this is a percentage measure. We are currently looking at 14% of all of cryptocurrencies market cap in those three stable coins. And there's an inverse relation here, right? When the stablecoin dominance is high, a lot of money is risk off, and the stablecoin dominance is low, a lot of money is risk on. So when this is declining, risk on assets tend to be increasing. So I'm not saying this will happen tomorrow, right? But once we do see a decline here, we will see risk on assets such as Solana, of course, as well, increase in value. When will this happen? Probably when a lot of the risk factors might clean up. For example, in traditional finance, we've got all the worries around a recession, around inflation, around rising interest rates. There's not a lot of clarity how this will all play out. But once we have seen a bottom, once Bitcoin and Ethereum at least slow down their fall, then maybe we can see more risk appetite again. Maybe then the stablecoin money will flow into risk on assets again. And maybe that's then the time when we can use this inherent leverage of Solana again to outperform Bitcoin and Ethereum. Until then, riding the bear market with something risky is a tough thing to do, right? I rather want to see a stabilization. There are different kinds of methods to do this. I simply use moving averages. I have backtested various moving averages. Here are the ones that work best for Bitcoin. Currently, we are still below the moving averages. It looks relatively bleak, in my humble opinion, in the short term. But times will change. So let's not be overreactive, but prepare ourselves for the next rally that will eventually come. There's a lot of exclusive content for the premium members here at thebitcoinstrategy.com. There's more information in this video over here. Hope to see you in the video, and thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.